So at the timing of this recording, I just finished doing the All In prediction video, which if you haven't seen yet, go ahead and please check that out and let me know what you thought in terms of the predictions and who you think will win each matchup. But it's really starting to settle in about the career about Bryan Danielson. I have come to realize that he really is one of the best of his generation, one of the best ever to do it. And this matchup against Swerve Strickland, in terms of predicting it, has been really difficult for me because I could see it going both ways. In many aspects of life, I try to see things from all angles. And I look at Bryan Danielson, and it's been well reported that he's been willing to put over talent. He knows that his time in the ring is limited, and I feel like he's that type of wrestler who wants to give back to the profession, give back to the business that really influenced his life, really. Obviously, we don't know Bryan Danielson on a personal level, but we've come to grow close to him through what we see on TV, through his matches, through his stories, through his ups, through his downs. And there's part of me that could see Bryan Danielson winning the matchup, defeating Swerve Strickland to become the new AEW World Champion and have a short title reign. I could definitely see that. Have a little mini farewell tour. But then there's another part of me where I'm like, Bryan Danielson has always seemed to be just a simple man who likes to wrestle and doesn't really need or crave that spotlight. And being the central story around this really has been family. Bryan Danielson, we know how close he is with his family, with his kids, with his wife. And if reports are to be believed, apparently they're going to be in attendance for his matchup here at All In. And in interviews, Bryan Danielson has expressed that his kids kind of want to see him lose because they want him home. And as someone who is very much in the understanding of the importance of family, I respect that. And there are some portions of the audience who don't want to give up Bryan Danielson just yet. And that's valid because what he's done for the business, what he's done for us, cannot be measured. But I think we should also keep in mind he's still a human being. He's still a father. He's a family man. So if this really is the end for Bryan Danielson, I just want to take a moment in this video and really just address my opinions and my thoughts on Bryan Danielson, share my experiences watching him in the ring and just knowing that I had the opportunity to watch him throughout his career. Early on, obviously, I was still at a very young age, so I didn't really get to see him during his prime Ring of Honor days. I wouldn't be introduced to the American Dragon until NXT in 2010. And funny enough, I remember going to WrestleMania 26 in 2010, and prior to the event, they had that battle royal. You know, they always had these battle royals as like a pre-show match for the crowd, and they had a moment where they had these individuals standing on the rampway and they introduced them to the audience saying that these were the stars of NXT. And I remember seeing Daniel Bryan. And at this time, I was very much new to the internet. I was still growing. I think I was like 11 or 12 at this time. And hearing rumblings of like, hey, they got Bryan Danielson. And I'm like, okay, like there's a lot of hype towards this guy. I noticed they flipped his name, Daniel Bryan. And from then on, I was always linked towards him. I thought he was one of the better wrestlers. I thought the way they presented him in terms of his character and his personality may not have been the most flattering, but he made up for it in the ring. And so to see him and his evolution from, one of those nerdy characters on NXT to a short-lived member on the Nexus, to his Money in the Bank run, to his initial world title run, Team Hell No, the Yes movement, the retirement, the return, finally him going to AEW. It's been such a wild ride. And I, for one, am so grateful and appreciative to have seen him throughout his career. Again, I didn't get to see the early years in Ring of Honor, but I got to see matches against CM Punk at Over the Limit, matches against John Cena at SummerSlam 2013, his matches at WrestleMania 30 against all members of Evolution. I got to see him win the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 31, the triumphant return at WrestleMania 34, that last run as the Eco WWE champion, and I thought that was just so fun. to see all these different iterations of the man, of the character, and of the legend that is Bryan Danielson. And then we got to see him have a second wind in this second, iteration of his career in All Elite Wrestling. And the match against Kenny Omega really put it on point for me as to what we were going to see. Then there was matches against guys like Will Ospreay, who I know that match just happened this year, but Will Ospreay was like another guy that I hadn't really been exposed to because I didn't have access to New Japan Pro Wrestling. I was just watching clips. And to see the magic that those two had performed at Dynasty solidified again that this guy is a once in a generation talent. And I'm referring to Bryan Danielson. I mean, no disrespect to Will Ospreay, but I look at Bryan Danielson and I feel like history will be kind to him in terms of what he's brought to pro wrestling. Before his involvement with the WWE, there was really only one other guy who was regarded as like an indie darling and one of those independent stars, and that was CM Punk. So together, what he and CM Punk were able to do in the WWE, I don't think it could be understated how much like these two have meant to the progression, again, not only of WWE but of mainstream pro wrestling. Undersized guys who weren't really the hulking figures of the 80s. They didn't have the big personalities of the 90s, but they brought in in-ring work, and that level of credibility that they brought to their characters through that in-ring work helped move them along in their careers. And then over time, they were able to develop these gimmicks and these storylines that help connect with the audience. Bryan Danielson, for so long, I looked at like as a Mick Foley character, where it's like we rooted for him, we sided with him, we wanted him to succeed, we wanted to see him win. He seemed like he was a member of the audience, like he was one of us, because again, he wasn't overall the biggest guy, but you could see he had one of the biggest hearts. So seeing his progression throughout his career, and now realizing that this very well could be the final match of his career, and having it be at Wembley Stadium for the world title in front of, God knows how many people will be there. If this is the end, I just want to take the moment and really say thank you, Bryan. And I doubt he'll be seeing this video, but for all of you who are pro wrestling fans like myself, I feel like you all can resonate with the level of impact and influence that the American Dragon has really carried over for the past 25 years. And I think, on one final note, one thing I never really realized until later on, I knew he was helped in terms of his training by Shawn Michaels. I know he gives a lot of credit to William Regal, which respect to William Regal. But having that connection of Shawn Michaels to Bryan Danielson, Shawn Michaels was my favorite growing up. He's my favorite wrestler of all time. And so to see that kind of transition to Bryan Danielson, it further gave him a sense of credibility to me, because I knew, well, Shawn's my guy. And if he is a Shawn guy, it's a no-brainer. I talked about my favorite matches with Bryan, and I talked about my favorite moments with Bryan. And I don't think this will be the end of him in pro wrestling. I think every now and then we'll see him pop up. But I do think in terms of a legacy, it'll be in-ring work. It'll be the Yes movement back in 2013 and 2014. It'll be his return to the ring in 2018. And I very much think in terms of like wrestling ability, we're going to look at this guy as like a Bret Hart, as like a Kurt Angle. Years from now, people will be studying his craft and the way that he presented his ability, his character work, because he evolved. As I keep talking about, evolved, because this was a guy who a lot of people didn't give credit for because they didn't have the personality. Over time, again, he got comfortable, we got comfortable with him, and to see that growth. Bryan Danielson will go down as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. He's one of the best in this generation, but I definitely can see the argument being made that at the very minimum, he could be considered a top 10 wrestler of all time. And so with that being said, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that and my appreciation and my gratitude towards him, towards his craft, towards his career. And again, if this isn't the end and he wins that world championship, this video would be pretty funny because I'm kind of already writing him off. But I think it would allow us all to enjoy that final title reign. Unless if it isn't. And if it is, it was one hell of a career. We thank you, Bryan, and we look forward to the next phase of your life, of your career. And with that being said, thank you, Bryan.